this day, the 29th of August, to all participants for this webinar. The participants who have joined through Zoom as a platform as well as YouTube platform. In the participants, there are so many registrations we have got for this particular webinar. About more than 500 registrations are there for today's webinar. And participants have joined from all corners of India, almost all states. I can name all states, and there are participants from different colleges, departments, institutions, universities. If you go on taking the names, the entire India will be covered. These are the participants. And there are different participants from 2 different countries also, that is from Egypt and Malaysia. So I heartily welcome you all, the participants, the faculties, the research students, PG students, and senior scientists. So today's webinar is based on a particular topic by an eminent scientist. That is topic is role of ichnology in paleontology and related sciences. It is a very important topic to be discussed because through this webinar you will come to know. And the today's eminent speaker is Dr. Mrs. Kveri Basin, Madam, from Agharkar Research Institute, Pune, which is funded by Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. So this webinar is arranged from Government Institute of Science, Department of Geology. So for this, I am very much thankful to our Honorable Director, Dr. R.A. Satpute, sir, Director Institute of Science. And I am also thankful to for permitting for this webinar, Director Higher Education, Maharashtra State, Pune. So let us move further. I invite Professor K.G. Kulkarni, sir, our senior faculty of the institute, for the message of our director. Because our director today, because of this preoccupied government work, official work, he is not able to come on this platform. So he has given you message for all participants. So I request Kulkarni sir, with the senior faculty member of the Government Institute of Science and head department of biophysics, I request Kulkarni sir to read the message of our director. Kulkarni sir, please.
Very good afternoon. This is the message which is being sent by our director, Dr. R.A. Satpute. I'm just reading it for all of you. Dear participants, I hereby welcome you all on the online webinar, and especially all the geoscientists, teachers, research students, undergraduate and postgraduate students of national webinar. You're welcome to this particular webinar. Government Institute of Science was established in the year 1974 at Aurangabad to provide the higher education and for the educationally backward areas of Maharashtra, especially the Marathwada region. Now, this institute has become one of the leading institutions of Maharashtra and also of the nation. The institute is funded and administered by Government of Maharashtra. However, for the academic purpose, especially for admission and examination, etc., it is affiliated to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Aurangabad. At present, the institute is running MSc and doctoral courses, including PhD in 5 different subjects, namely botany, biophysics, biotechnology, microbiology, and geology. I congratulate the geology department who has arranged this webinar, and I hope this webinar will create the interest within you and will utilize this particular knowledge for your future work. Once again, I welcome you all and wish the organizers for success.
Thank you, Kulkarni sir, for reading the message of our Honorable Director, Dr. R.A. Satpute sir. Now let us move further And before starting the webinar by Kulkarni Madam, I must introduce my department also. The department established in the 1984. We have a pure geology course, MSc in geology, for 2 years, divided into 4 semesters. And this is of, we have intake capacity 20. And until now, we were having the CET. This year, I don't know what will be the decision. But until now, we were having the CET for these 20 intake students. And we have a PhD course. The department was funded by the different projects, funded by different departments of Government of India, that is UGC and DST and Ministry of Earth Sciences. So from all these departments, we have received funds for the different projects, for the paleontological research, for hydrogeological research, and even for the petrological research. So besides this, the other areas which we are working on in the department, the faculty members are working in the different subject areas, that is hydrogeology, hydrochemistry, as well as groundwater exploration, and paleontology, sedimentology. And besides this, we receive the different institutions and the field areas for the mapping and field tours. So through that, we impart the knowledge regarding the mapping as well as the observation of the fields and the different rocks, etc. So let us move further. This is about my department, and let us move further. I request my colleague, Dr. M.S. Sonar, sir, to invite and introduce today's speaker, Dr. Mrs. Kveri Basin, Madam. Dr. Sonar, sir, please.
Thank you, sir. I am introducing today's resource person, Dr. Mrs. Kantimati Girish Kulkarni. She is presently working as a scientist E in Agarkar Research Institute at Pune. She has completed her MSc with distinction from Pune University in 1983. Then she had joined Maharashtra Association of Cultivation of Sciences, MACS. Presently, it is called as Agarkar Research Institute, Pune, as a JRF since 1983 to 1985. And she did her PhD under the guidance of late Dr. M.A. Ghare. Her PhD thesis was one of the unique and totally devoted first thesis in India on ichnology of Jurassic of Wagad Formation. She has received INSA Visiting Fellowship for 1983-1984 and also awarded by Young Achiever Award for Science at Platinum Jubilee Celebrations of All India Women's Conference 2003. Dr. Kulkarni has granted Erasmus Teaching Mobility Fellowship for 2017-18 and visited Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland. She has 58 publications in Sci International and National Journal, and also she has so far completed 13 research projects, and her 3 projects are ongoing. She has 5 students guided and for PhD, and 7 MSc dissertations she has produced. Dr. Kulkarni is the fellow of International Ecological Association, and she is also the life member of Gondwana Geological Society, Nagpur. Now I am inviting Dr. Kulkarni to deliver her lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Sonar, for the introduction. And well, yes, I should also take this opportunity to thank the Director, Institute of Science, Dr. Satpute, Dr. Vanzarwadkar, and all the faculty members at the Institute of Science. And it's really a pleasure to be with you people. And I have learned that there have been many registrations. And yes, today's topic is slightly to say not very much included in the syllabi of the undergraduate, or even for that matter the postgraduate courses in India, excepting for a few departments. One of them I definitely know as the Department of Geology, MS University. And since today's gathering is a varied one, ranging from UG students, I think it would be appropriate that I start with introduction to the subject of ichnology, giving its definitions, and then moving on as to how one uses ichnology to address different issues in geology. So to begin with, yes, as you all know, the topic is role of ichnology. Paleontology and related sciences. All of us during some time in our life definitely walk on sand along the beaches or in the sand dunes. And when we do so, we leave behind our footprints. The way we leave behind our footprints, there are other organisms or other animals that also do the same. And whether it is wet sand, wet mud, or even in case dry sand, maybe a beach sand or riverine sand. And this fact of tracing footprints was recognized long ago in 1891 by the well-known author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who is rather the creator of the famous detective Sherlock Holmes. And he very rightly said, there is no branch of detective science which is so important and so much neglected as the art of tracing footsteps. We shall now go and see how these footsteps, maybe human, maybe other organisms, vertebrates or invertebrates, help us in paleontology. To begin with, let me show you a few photographs of the present day beach. And as you can see, all of you must have at some point of time seen these structures. And the more inquisitive ones would have definitely tried to find out as to how these structures have come here. Here you see at least two different types of traces. Okay. What you see here is something like the footprint of cats, our domestic cats, but it's of a slightly different animal called as the palm civet, which lives in the swampy regions of even our west coast. Now let's see how traces are created. Yes, do spare some time to see how the traces are being created in wet sand, fine sand. On your screen, you can see two types of traces. And as the screen moves towards your left, you see that the trace morphology also changes. And you have on your screens now another creator of the bigger trace. Both of them are gastropods. Here, the kind of sediment is the same. The softness is the same. All properties are the same. You have two gastropods, but one is inhabited by a hermit crab, and the other is that of a gastropod, the mollusk. But the traces being left behind by them are totally different. Why I need to go into these details are because it is these features that we are going to use to understand the intricacies of ichnology. Activities of ancient organisms or animals preserved in rocks are known as trace fossils. And the branch which deals with this study is called as ichnology. Study of fossil traces is, as you can see, is paleoichnology, and that of present day traces is neoichnology. Now, what's the difference between our conventional fossils or body fossils and trace fossils? Well, the body fossils tell us a lot about the anatomy of the ancient organisms that we are dealing with, while trace fossils provide great insight or evidence of the behavior of these organisms. Now, to understand ichnology, we need to understand first and foremost understand the principles of ichnology. What do these principles say? They're usually common in rocks where you do not find the conventional or what we know as body fossils. It's not that they are not found where body fossils are found, but yes, where body fossils are not found, we conveniently label them as unfossiliferous, overlooking the presence of these valuable structures that we now know as trace fossils. Another feature we should remember is that one animal can produce different structures depending on what behavior it is or what activity it is doing. We saw in the very first slide that a crab had made certain traces on the surface of the sand. It had also made a burrow within the sand. So it is showing two different behavioral traits of the same animal. Now, the same individual may produce different structures corresponding with identical behavior. That is, the behavior is the same, but the substrate is different. That is, the substrate could be water laden and very fine. It could be coarse sand but dry, and accordingly, the structure being left behind is going to be different. Next one, where animals belong to different groups, totally unrelated groups, may also produce identical structures when the behavior of these animals are the same. That is, all of them are searching for food in a given particular set of environment, or they are scavenging for food in a particular environment. We do get these trace fossils in abundance, a similar type of trace in lot of abundance. What does this say? Now, when one animal, especially the mobile ones, they can create many traces during their lifetime, and the number of body fossils or their body parts may be preserved or may not be preserved. The most important aspect of this particular type of fossils is that there is no secondary displacement or transport, essentially because they are sedimentary structures. And so if a sediment is destroyed or a sedimentary rock is destroyed, the structure also is going to be destroyed, unlike body fossils where these fossils can be removed from their parent rock and transported great distances and deposited elsewhere. A feature of trace fossils, most of them are largely facies dependent. That is, this very feature makes them a very good tools for paleoenvironmental interpretations. And so to say, the lopside is that the preservation of the organism creating the trace is rarely found along with the trace. In very few cases do you get the or causative organism preserved. How is this behavior classified? We'll just have a quick look. They're basically classified into these many major groups depending on their behavior as to what activity they are doing, whether that is locomotion, moving from one place to another, resting, nothing much to explain, dwelling, that there are animals that are mobile but live in a particular place, and there are the sessile animals that live and die in one place and they do not move out of their burrows. Feeding is scanning the sediment or collecting sediment, food from the sediment. Grazing, as we all know, the most famous of the grazers are the ingesters are the earthworms. Escape. Yeah, when there is danger, an animal always tries to move away or escape from its position where it is being harmed. Nesting. Nesting is a very inherent quality of most of the higher organisms, not to rule out some of the lower invertebrates also, but it is more, common among the higher organisms, where the parents or the adults build nests to take care of they lay eggs and they breed them and they take care of their young ones. That's a pictorial view for the people not conversant with the different shapes and varieties included in these different classes. Now, trace fossils are actually the product of three parameters: the producer, that's the animal itself, its behavior, and importantly, the substrate in which it is located. And all these can have varying degrees of influence on the final structure or the resultant morphology that we have with us as trace fossils. Let's take a brief look at what is an ichnofacies. It is actually a conceptual construct based on the identification of key features, that is, key morphologic features shared by different ichnosynosis, that is, a group of a wide range of ages, that is, ranging across a wide time scale, but formed under similar set of environmental conditions. So let's define an assemblage of trace fossils that characterizes an environment in terms of water depths, current energy, and marine versus non-marine conditions is what an ichnofacies represents. Though the organisms that make a trace fossil can change, as they often do over time, the assemblage of traces in each of the ichnofacies do not change. In fact, these assemblages have stayed the same since the time they appeared hundreds of millions of years ago during the Cambrian, and in some cases even earlier. And all these features make ichnofacies reliable records of ancient environments. Now, these ichnofacies are also characterize the broad environments as well as the substrates that they characterize. This is a very common figure, and that is a profile from the shore to the center of the ocean basin. And this is how it's a general, distribution of the different ichnofacies that occur right from the rocky shore to the abyssal zone. We should today concentrate a bit more on the soft ground marine ichnofacies, and we have 5 major ichnofacies. I wouldn't go into the details of the names. Of course, the names indicate the characteristic and dominant, the trace fossil in these particular groups, as when it was identified for the first time, or the ichnofacies were proposed by Xylacher in 1953. Later on, it was found that even if these typical trace fossil genera may be absent, but the assemblage indicating the behavior will definitely be there. And that is how we use ichnofacies in our analysis. Now, these ichnofacies can be further divided or subdivided into subfacies within these facies, depending on the characteristic assemblages that one gets in one's own area of research. Let's have a look at what are the forms or the physical forms, the morphologies that one gets in the different ichnofacies. The Silenthes ichnofacies is on the, the border of a typical marine environment. It occurs both clastic and carbonate coastal sediments in strand plains, delta plains, estuaries, lagoons, and bays, so on and so forth. Here are some of the pictures that from India that we have got from the Silent ichnofacies along with their creators. The Scolithos ichnofacies is essentially characterized by vertical burrows of the different varieties, which you can see on your screens, and they occur from foreshore to upper and middle shore face of wave-dominated shorelines, and also in some cases in marine turbidites, where the shallow marine conditions are mimicked or copied. Yeah, you can see here all the vertical forms. You have the U-shaped burrows. You have the U-shaped burrows with what are called as sprite, and the typical Scolithos, after which the ichnofacies is named. And then you have another crab burrow that is where the burrow wall is strengthened or reinforced with the help of mud pellets by the crabs themselves. And then here you have what is called as a fugicnion or an escape structure. And this is typically an escape structure of a bivalve. As the bivalve was resting somewhere, was living somewhere here, but with sedimentation, before it could get smothered, it moved up and in the wake, leaving behind such an escape structure. The Cruziana ichnofacies, and this ichnofacies is abundant both by way of diversity as well as number in the kind of trace fossils genera that you have, and they occur in fair weather wave bays to storm wave bays, and the lower zone, lower shore face to lower offshore, and also in restricted estuaries bays. But here the diversity is very much reduced. And what characterizes this ichnofacies is you have mostly the feeding structures and some trails dominated by feeding structures. There are also dwelling structures, but much reduced in number. Let's have a look at some of the pictures that contribute to this ichnofacies. Well, that's a locomotory trail. That too is a locomotory trail. These are feeding structures. This is a locomotory trail. That is a feeding structure. This is a resting structure. And you can see for yourself the variety, diversity of the forms that you have in this particular ichnofacies. I am going into the details, slight details of these, because it is these ichnofacies that form the basis of, or the foundation of all our interpretations. The Zoophycus ichnofacies, if you remember the profile picture that I showed you, is in this facies occur towards the deeper part of the basin, and it's characterized by a very reduced variety. Number may be good, and it occurs in represents quiet water settings of below storm wind bays, and it's usually dominated by again feeding structures, but these are essentially scanning structures where the amount of food available is quite reduced, and hence the animals have to have specialized methods of extracting food from the sediment for their survival. These are the typical forms of, this is Zoophycus, after which the ichnofacies is named, and then you have a few more, something that might mislead you to be of being algae or some branch stems. These are actually burrows. And then here again you have an intricately meandering feeding structure out here. And then we go on to the deepest of the ichnofacies, and that is the Neritis ichnofacies. Here again, you see an increase in the variety, in the diversity, in the morphology. Occurs in bathyal to abyssal, typically low energy, but yet still oxygenated. Occur in submarine canyons and abyssal plains, and are also commonly interstratified with sandy turbidites. And as you can see in this drawing, most of them are very, very intricate designs, tight meanders, and very regular forms. This shows the extent to which the animal has to exert energy to exploit the maximum and from a fairly depauperate environment. Well, all these are not from India, because I have not seen any fish sediments in India, but when I was in Poland, I did visit the Holy Cross, the fish Carpathians, from where I took these pictures. Well, they are enriched. The Jagiellonian University people are literally sitting there, and they have a wealth of fish trace fossils with them. And since I had the opportunity, I did take a few pictures so that I could share it with you people. Well, having seen what the ichnofacies are, the soft ground ichnofacies are, we shall now have a look at the substrate controlled ichnofacies. What do I mean by substrate controlled? It is the strength of the substrate. I mean, that is how soft it is, or whether it is a rock, or whether it's a firm ground, whether it is rich in, well laden with water, or it has been dewatered, or stiff mud, or whether the substrate is wood. The glossy fungitis ichnofacies again represents shallow to marginal marines, stable, cohesive substrates that are and dewatered muds that rarely occur in compacted sand, because however compacted the sand may be, it's difficult for them to create these traces. And since they occur in the compacted muds, whatever claw, when they're digging around, whatever marks are left behind by the appendages, they are impressed on the walls of their burrows. As you can very well see here, all these are the claw markings of the organisms that created them. That this is preserved only if that the substrate is firm enough to preserve the delicate markings. We have the Tripolitistical ichnofacies, which is typically found in hard grounds or well-lithified substrates. And the name Tripolitis derives from the genus Tripolitis, which is characterized by such borings Now here, when you come to hard grounds, we use the term borings because here the animal literally has to drill into the rock and create a space for itself. And it is all these are, most of them are worm borings, whereas Entobia, this one, is a sponge boring. There are different species created by different varieties of sponges. And then we have the bivalves that drill into rocks and make it their abode. Why are they important? Because they indicate long periods of bioerosion uninterrupted by frequent depositional events. This is going to be made use of when we come to the interpretation of certain horizons. Well, these are most of them are from Kutch, and they are from the Myocene. And this, of course, is a polyester resin cast, not a natural cast. Here we have the natural cast because when something bores into a solid, there is going to be a cavity. And for us to study the structures in these cavities, we need to impregnate these cavities with some artificial medium if nature has not done it. And this is, you can see the various morphologies out here. And these are typically torpedo-like features, characteristic of the club-shaped borings created by bivalves. The Tripolitistical facies occurs fairly deep in the tire in a given layer. We have the Nathicus facies, which is of a much shallower nature, and it represents the scraping or gnawing marks or attachment marks of certain organisms. They usually occur in mobile hard grounds or shell grounds formed under moderate to low energy conditions, and they represent short-term bioerosion. And the preservation of this particular ichnofacies in the rock record is comparatively rare because it's a shallow time. And so they are the first to be affected by the agents of nature on bioerosion are removed. These are some of the this is the attachment scar. These are the scraping marks of gastropods. These are actually the borings of bryozoa. And these are the marks that help to stick on, to hold fast. We move on to a very specialized type of hard ground, and that is the wood ground. All the while we were concerned with lithic substrate, now we come to a xylic substrate, and that's why this is identified as a separate species, because separate ichnofacies, mainly because the behavior involved here is related to the search for food. In case of the hard lithic substrate, it was essentially for shelter, whereas here it is in the quest for food. And the xylic substrate, that is the trees or the tree trunks that wash down into the estuaries or the deltas, into the oceans, are attacked by organisms, especially the bivalves, and the xylic or the cellulose is taken up by these organisms as food. Now that's a piece of wood, fossil wood, that is heavily infested by the genus Pteridolitis. With that, I think I should now come to some of the cases or the case histories, typical ones that we have used in interpreting certain features. And I'll take an example for some of them, one each. And let me take you to the Kutch basin, sedimentary basin, and just north of, we'll be traveling from eastern part of the Kutch Basin to the southwestern part of the Kutch Basin over a short period of time. And we'll see how these trace fossils have helped us interpret the migration of a given set of depositional environment. Well, here we are to the north of Bhuj, and as you can see, a well stratified section out here of sandstones, and then you have these ones are your normal sandstones, whereas these look different because they're heavily bioturbated. A close-up again here will show you the type of bedding, whereas here you can see the bedding has been totally destroyed, and you can see the burrows out here. As you can see, there is not much of variety here, and they're essentially all vertical burrows. And in these burrows, we have, I had shown you one, the U-shaped burrows, they are plenty out here. From this particular region, okay, before I move on, show you a close-up of how thickly or heavily, densely bioturbated these horizons are. And it is just this portion. You have the scale, and this is how it looks on the bedding plane. This is the sectional view, and this is on the bedding plane. Let's move southwards, and we come to the Mandvi Road. Those who have visited Kutch would definitely know where this particular section is. And here again, we have a section of sandstones, showing different types of bedding. And if you see these two horizons that are demarcated here, get a closer look. And the upper horizons, you have this kind of bioturbation, wherein you have the branched burrows of, I told you, Ophiomorpha. Now, all the structures that we are seeing here essentially constitute the Scholithos ichnofacies. And let me also tell you that here the Scholithos ichnofacies is represented by monospecific forms. You don't have much variety out here. And the lower horizon that I showed you, you have U-shaped burrows that we also saw in the earlier section. And the U-shaped burrows on the bedding plane appear somewhat like this. Now, where you have monospecific or monogeneric ichnofacies, as ichnofacies represented by monospecific forms or monogeneric forms, they are called as opportunistics. These opportunistic animals know they come or occupy or they colonize areas that are not very hospitable. The substrate is shifting, energy conditions are high, and that's why a variety of animals cannot colonize such environments. And it is these ones that come and colonize, as well as not just colonize, but thrive and bioturbate these horizons. And what we have seen is from the eastern part, this particular ichnofacies has traveled in time, and thereby we have been able to confirm the progression of the delta front from the eastern part to the western horizons over time in the late Jurassic to early Cretaceous times in Kutch. And that is how the prograding delta environment has moved from one place to another over a period of time. Now let's go on to another part of our own country, and that is Kveri Basin. Quite a few people, I believe, who have joined here have been working in Kveri Basin. And here I'll just tell you the depositional history of just the Kare formation. And we know very well that the Kveri formation rests on the basement, and what we have here is the distribution of trace fossils. You have these different forms. Well, I mean, at this point of time, names to the newcomers or the students is not much of it. It is what the ichnofacies that matter. And we have the proximal, atypical, and distal of the Cruziana facies out here. And then we also have the Scolithosical facies. Now let's see how we are able to interpret how the sedimentation processed or the depositional history of this particular Kveri formation. Now, it commenced in outer to middle shelf, and where you have the, which is represented by the archetypical Cruziana ichnofacies. So I would remind you or like you to go back to the initial, mentally go back to the initial slides that I showed you about the Cruziana facies. And then what happens to the sediment here? You have a fining upward sediment. And then we have the MFS. How is that represented? We have the archetypical Cruziana ichnofacies being replaced by the distal Cruziana ichnofacies, and it does continue. And then across the MFS, with passage of time, we have a switch over wherein there is from outer shelf, we move towards middle to lower to middle shore phase, and we have coarsening upwards, and the distal Cruziana ichnofacies is replaced by proximal Cruziana ichnofacies, which is further replaced by the Scolithos ichnofacies. And that, in short, gives you the depositional history of approximately 500 meters of a section. From the environment use of trace fossils in paleo environments, of which I have given you 2 examples, let's move on to how it can be applied in stratigraphy. Because as I said earlier, unlike body fossils, since these are mainly facies controlled, this itself makes them poor index fossils. Nonetheless, there are certain groups which have been put to use and proved over time that there are certain features that can definitely be used in stratigraphy. This cartoon out here shows you 2 people, 2 geologists in field, arguing. What are they arguing about? They are arguing about where to place the Precambrian-Cambrian boundary. This gentleman on the left tells you, well, this has been what we've been also taught in during our courses, that the first appearance of trilobites marks the PCC boundary. Over passage of time, it was found that trace fossils that can be attributed to trilobites were found way below the first occurrence of the trilobite body fossils. And then it was debated that, well, if the body fossils of trilobites are not found, but trace fossils that can be attributed to trilobites can be found way below, then the PCC boundary should be marked at the position where we start getting trilobite trace fossils. Along with the trilobite trace fossils, further research showed that there were certain other forms which accompany them. And various sections across the globe were studied. And then now the PCC boundary is marked not at the first appearance of the first trilobite body fossils, but the trilobite trace fossils or arthropod trace fossils, and certain other, there are just 2 more trace fossils that go along with this. And this helps us in defining the PCC boundary. That is one of the major contributions of ichnology or paleoichnology in stratigraphy. And over having worked in different basins, we have also found that, and in discussions with colleagues elsewhere in who are working in basins all across the globe, it's now been realized that may not be global correlations, but interbasinal correlations with regards to stratigraphy can definitely be made on the type of assemblages that we get in these areas. Let's go to Jaisalmer again. And it's a very small sequence. But here I would like to share with you that how changes in the Econo facies tell you about, again, the changes or the changes that the diagenetic changes a particular sediment horizon has undergone. And then how do we, interpret the fluctuations in sea level across a small thickness, wherein you do not have all the major sedimentological attributes that tell you about the changes in environment. Well, this what you see in the background is actually the quaternary. And what we are interested in this portion, which is about just barely a meter, slightly above a meter. So what you have here is fine-grained marley rock. And let's see now, what does this rock host? Before that, let's have a closer look up. See, these are the limestones. And over here, you have something that looks like that has the appearance of a conglomerate. Actually, it is a conglomerate. But before we come to the conglomerate, there are things that have happened here. And just let's have a look at what has happened. This portion was initially a soft ground. And what we have here, if you remember, is the Zoophycus, the genus Zoophycus, and representing the Zoophycus ichnofacies, because this entire region is fully covered with these Zoophycus. Now, when we say Zoophycus, we are looking at a particular environmental setup, particular depth, and energy conditions. What happens to this? The surface of this particular bed is marked by borings. I presume you can appreciate, I don't know how big it looks on your screen. I hope you're able to appreciate all these borings out here. And above these borings, or just along with them, you have the encrusters. Now, these encrusters, as the very name suggests, would not be there if there was not a hard ground, because they cannot encrust or attach themselves to soft sediment. So here itself, you can see the transition from soft ground through firm ground to hard ground. And above this, this conglomeratic horizon. Well, this is that conglomeratic horizon which encases large pebbles of the hard ground. You can see the borings out here very clearly, and over that, the conglomerate is fairly thick, about a meter, and it is fully. It does have plenty of transported shell material, fossil material, and with that you have but what it tells you is that the transportation, the size of these pebbles tells you that the transportation has not been for very long distances, or it has been very short distance. So that is, in short, this story or the history of this particular bed out here. From here, let's go on to what is today, in today's times, a very hot topic for almost all geologists, and that is hydrocarbon exploration. Because people usually ask, how are your trace fossils useful in petroleum exploration? Well, I personally have not done much research in this area, but have studied a lot, read a lot, and so I would think I could definitely share with you these things, these concepts, which maybe the younger generation can definitely put to use in field, but has been worked out and proved beyond doubt in petroleum yielding basins across the globe. Why has been the subject of paleoichnology not been very useful or given attention to in hydrocarbon exploration? The main reason is that it is believed that animal activity or bioturbation destroys porosity and permeability. So until and unless we do away with this notion or dogma, it will not be very easy for us to understand how we can put to use the bioturbation, the ichnofacies that we have at our disposal for use in hydrocarbon exploration. And well, this concept or this notion is now being done away with because of the recent studies that have demonstrated so. These studies tell us that in the Carboniferous scholastic reservoirs, yes, bioturbation has reduced the porosity, permeability, especially by the bioturbation of the deposit fields. However, on the other hand, where burrows of suspension feeders are passively filled by coarser material, there is significant increase in porosity and permeability as the degree of connectivity between the layers is increased. Let's see something about permeability, fabrics, and distribution of porosity. And how does bioturbation affect these parameters? What happens is when an animal burrows, it redistributes or reorganizes the sand grains. And this brings about an automated redistribution of the or change in the fabric. The trace fossils themselves per se have certain characteristics, both physical as well as geochemical, that are different from the host rock or the surrounding rock. How do they influence the porosity permeability? They literally physically change the pore throat distribution and acting as loci for cementation and dissolution processes during early and late diagenesis. That's how they bring about the change in pore throat distribution. And when these, which they normally do, act together or act in tandem, these processes, the range of permeability generated in these fabrics is really very broad. Now, it's research and actual trials have proved that the volume comprising biogenic fabric is commonly much higher than volumes of fracture systems. It is on the scale of 1 to 3. That is, 10 to 100% versus 1 to 3%. So that is the difference that can bring about in the volume of these biogenic fabrics as compared to those volume generated by fractures. Let's see something about how do we talk of the permeability that is enhanced by bioturbation. And they can be described either as dual porosity flow media or dual permeability flow media. Of course, all this jargon is probably very conversant with to those people working in the petroleum industry and or those who are aiming to work in the petroleum industry. For the beginners, anyway, it is fair enough and good enough to know these terms so that you don't feel fish out of water if someone throws these terms at you at some point of time. And so what is dual porosity? Where the matrix permeability is within 2 orders of magnitude of baropermeability. That is called as dual porosity. And where dual porosity exists, the entire rock volume is used to conduct the flow. Now, what implications does it have? More pore volume contributes to gas production because the volume itself is more. And due to capillarity, multi-phase fluid transport may lead to segregation, that is separation of different fluid phases. Oil may be isolated in finer parts of the reservoir. And it is seen that the infauna or sediment ingesters, that is animals that live within the sediment or those that ingest or eat sediment, the bioturbation created by such organisms brings about dual porosity in foreshore sand dominated intertidal flats and lower shore face deposits. We come to the next type, and that is dual permeability. Here, the matrix permeability and baropermeability differ by an order of 3 or more. And what happens here is, when we look at the reservoir, it's only the higher permeability parts that contribute to the flow of the fluid. In this case, oil and gas. Dual permeability is a result of open burrows that are passively filled in by coarser material or actively backfilled. And these are usually the elements that are associated with the Cruziana zoophycus and Glossy Ichnology, and occurring in offshore to lower shore face and heterolithic tidal bars, base of transgressive successions. How is the baropermeability assessed? There are a number of factors, and I won't be going into the details of these factors because otherwise then we'll be running out of time. And I think I've already crossed the limit of 1 hour. And so we have these 5 factors: permeability contrast, bioturbation intensity is very important, bioturbation connectivity. That is, the traces or the burrows need to be connected to one another if they have to form an effective transmitting medium. And the area, burrow surface area, and burrow architecture. Obviously, the architecture and the connectivity is going to matter a lot in these exercises. Now, how is biogenic flow media classified? Based on sedimentological, ichnological, diagenetic, and stratigraphic context, Pemberton and Gingras in 2005 gathering all their experiences from the different oil fields that they had worked in, they proposed these 5 broad classes. And we'll see an example of, I again won't go into the details of what they are. These could be actually read from these books, this publication of theirs. So the first one is the surface constrained discrete heterogeneities. We have an example from the Ghawar oil field, that is Saudi Arabia. As you can see here, you have surface constraint, the name as itself suggests. You have micritic unit deposited, and what happens here is there is deposition is cut off, and the entire sediment is colonized by the higher invertebrates, in this case the arthropods, the highly burrowing arthropods. And you can see here in this figure that these arthropods are mining away and constructing a network, a maze of these burrows. These burrows are open. When deposition resumes, there was coarser material that deposited. The burrows being open, they were passively filled in. So in a low permeable substrate, you have introduction of high porosity and permeability zone. And in the Ghawar field, it's been reported that 70% of production comes from this single unit. So that is what bioturbation or activity of animals can bring about. This is another example of the similar surface constrained heterogeneities. Here you can see the U-shaped burrows that I talked to you of, the long ones, and look at the depth that they are transgressing. Next one, the next type is non-surface constraint. Here there are no constraints of the lithologies, and what happens here is that this is an example from the Sumatra Java Sea, and you have zoophycus. These are the cross sections of the Ichnogenous zoophycus, and this zoophycus here has been backfilled with planktic foraminifera. There are plenty of hollow globigerinoid tests, and these are full of natural gas. And this has been very effectively explored. So this is an example, a living example or a proven example of non-surface constrained discrete heterogeneities. Multi-layer colonizers. This is one of the most effective, examples or situations for the hydrocarbon industry. You have impermeable silt and mudstone layers interlayered with sandstone beds. Now what happens is the animals burrow through these layers, and in the process they connect two disconnected sandstone horizons, and that is how they bring about connectivity. If you remember, just a few slides ago I talked to you about burrow architecture and connectivity. This is how it plays an important role in, you can see two different examples. One is in the deep marine turbidites, and the other is in the shallow marine tidalites. In a given area, in a given region, you could have the different types of heterogeneities being interspersed with each other, and then that would be a classic example which can help you in hydrocarbon exploration. So now we can definitely say, and there is plenty of what is the scope for people working or interested in working with trace fossils and sedimentology. I would like to mention here, add here that yes, they are biogenic sediment, they are sedimentary structures, but since they are created by animals, they are also a part of paleontology, as well as they also contribute to the subject of sedimentology. Well, before I close off, I would like to give you a very interesting, share with you an interesting story wherein a tiny organism revolutionized a particular engineering feat, and that has revolutionized construction of tunnels. How? Let's have a look. 175 years ago, the first modern tunnel was built. This is the headline of the news inspired by a boring animal. What was that? Let's go slightly back into history and try to find out. After 18 years of intense work, the 1.3 kilometer long, 1,300 feet long Thames Tunnel beneath the Thames River was opened to the public in 1843. Well, the construction of this tunnel started sometime in 1828. And if you go back to the automation, the mechanization, the technologies available, you can, at that point of time, you can very well imagine how difficult it was to construct a tunnel below the river. And it so happened in 1828, water leaked in, causing the drowning of 6 workers. And obviously, the tunnel work was stopped. Until 2 engineers came up with a very, very ingenious solution. Who were these engineers? They were Brunel and Cochrane. And their source of inspiration was a mollusk called as pteridot, which we all know as shipworm. It's a mollusk. And this revolutionized tunneling thereafter. What happened? Brunel and Cochrane were in London and they didn't know what to do, so they were spending some time in the harbor, sitting on a plank near a wooden ship. And there, since they had nothing to do, they were observing an animal bore into the wood there. I told you of Pteridolitis ichnofacies. And then what did they observe? That the animal, which is known as the shipworm because of its elongated shape, remember it's a bivalve, it has modified its body. So it's a long body and the shell is reduced to a very small portion. If you can see here, this is the entire animal. And what it did was it was secreting calcareous material as it moved ahead in the tunnel. Very similar to the big machines that you have here now. And when they observed this, it dawned on them, they got an idea. And they used this typical technique to finish the Thames tunnel. The miners would dig, protected by a movable wooden cage, and other workers behind the miners would then secure the tunnel with, or the walls of the tunnel with bricks and mortar. And so this concept of sailing the tunnels is inspired from a very small invertebrate the mollusca, a pterido, shipworm. And I think that's how I would like to give this message that yes, technology can help us in various ways. Only thing we are not aware of how they have contributed to the progress of science and the development of technology. Thank you, friends. Thank you so much for a patient hearing. Yeah, it's been me doing the talking all around. Yes, I would definitely like to take questions that you have any. So I shall just quit the screen. Any questions? I would be very happy to answer. Hi, Bhavani.
Nice talk. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I was scared that you would be there.
I mean, this is no, I was really happy that you took up hydrocarbon exploration.
Thank you so
In
much.
fact, I would like to inform everyone that most of our good producing basins in India are bioturbated. Whether you take Gandhar field in Kveri Basin or Kalol sand, which is one of the most prestigious sand of Kveri Basin, that is also bioturbated. And Bombay High is of course bioturbated. Assam, you go, it's bioturbated. So it's there, but we are not looking at it. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the support.
I request Professor Kundal to comment on it. Professor Kundal, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Parcha. I read your comment. Thank you, Dr. Parcha.
I request Dr. Parcha, sir, to comment on. If you have any point to discuss, please. The forum is open for discussion, please. Professor Kundal, sir.
People are putting up on the chat.
Hello.
Yeah, sir, please.
I'm audible.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, you are audible.
So Kantimati, I want to congratulate you because you and myself, we were contemporary, and you nearly spent 4 decades.
Yes.
4 decades totally on ecology.
Yes.
So you are the only person in our India, perhaps, if we see historical aspect, because others were working on many things. Our gurus, Badwe sir and Ghare sir, they were working on many groups. But you are the person who has nearly spent 4 decades. So that is a marvelous thing, and the lecture is fantastic. You are very clear, and so I would like to compliment you that you accepted the invitation of my student, Dr. Vanjarwadkar, and Dr. Sonar is my colleague. Dr. Vanjarwadkar is my PhD student, second PhD student. So you by accepting their invitation, you have obliged.
It's my pleasure.
So that is what I wanted to say.
I should thank all of you.
Okay, that is it.
Ma'am, there is a question.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Can't hear you.
Muted. You're muted, sir.
Hello.
Ma'am, you please unmute yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Am I audible, madam? Yeah, please. There is a question from YouTube by Shivangi Fulmali.
Yes.
Shivangi Fulmali. How ichnofossils indicate the diagenetic process?
How do they indicate the diagenetic process?
Diagenetic process.
See, when there is when a rock or when a horizon of sediment undergoes, when a layer of sediment undergoes diagenesis, there is essentially a change in the substrate consistency. And as substrate consistency changes, the animals colonizing that particular kind of substrate change. And that's how the ichnofacies changes. And on the basis of the change in ichnofacies, you can come to know about the progression of diagenesis.
Yeah. There is one more discussion in the chat box.
Yeah.
By Dr. S.K. Parcha sir. He is asking why not these should be given the syllabus and in the syllabus with weightage, because this is having an oil exploration angle too.
Yeah, that's for the policymakers of the UGC to include it.
Yeah. I welcome. Yeah,
Ma'am, Kantivati ma'am, Kantivati ma'am.
Yes.
Kantivati ma'am, now you are part of the UGC syllabus making body. And so I think you must suggest these changes. And all the students here at the university, we were all watching with the same connection. And we all were saying that we have never had teachers over the past 20 years or maybe even more who have taught us anything about this. And people don't know, people were surprised to know that such ichnofacies can also tell us about the marine ream. It can tell us about ecology. And all these things are so important. And I really compliment you for bringing it out on this forum and talking about it. And yes, now you are part of the body which is modifying the UGC syllabus. So I think you should take up the task and do the change.
When I did it, I had included. I don't know what happened to it later.
There is another question, ma'am.
Yeah.
From Hussain sir.
Yeah, please.
Professor Hussain sir from Chennai. Is it possible to differentiate freshwater and marine ichnofossils? Finally, I would like to know from you why ichnofossils workers are less in India. Yeah.
Yes, ichnofossils workers are less in India. That I do agree. And well, at least I have given 3 students, and a couple of more being added. And Bhavani Singh Desai is there, who is doing a fairly concerted work.
Even I also work on ichnology, ma'am. My PhD thesis one part is of ichnology, and I came to you for discussion.
I know.
Along with the fossil specimens.
And yes, there are people who are taking these things seriously now. As you know, we are always late to realize and wake up to certain calls, but I think there is always hope. And now coming to Professor Hussain's question, yes, Professor Hussain, we definitely can identify the changes in ichnofacies. I didn't touch upon the terrestrial ichnofacies in this particular talk because, well, I had to restrict myself somewhere. And most of the ichnofacies, the terrestrial ichnofacies, are attributed to the work of insects, which live either in soil or along water bodies, freshwater water bodies.
Yeah.
In systems, we do not have much of a contribution or preservation. Animals are there, they are creating traces, but in the fluvial system, it becomes difficult for their preservation. Nonetheless, the freshwater or the non-marine arthropods, non-marine crustaceans do bring about bioturbation in the freshwater environment also.
Yeah, there is one point has been included by Dr. Parcha sir.
Yeah.
Actually, he did his work in Himalayan terrain.
Yeah,
so his observations are that he is telling his contribution that in Cambrian to Cretaceous boundary, the rocks which are there in Cambrian and Cretaceous, there were no records of the other fossils. So they concentrated on the ichnofossils, what you have already discussed in your presentation. But he is also having some papers on that,
I know.
especially trilobite. So he in the chat box he written as there are the records of the test fossils from the Cambrian, Himalayan region, Cambrian to Cretaceous. Ichnology is already a part of the postgraduate syllabus in Dr. S.K. Srivastav sir is telling to everyone. They can go for the particularly in the in some of the universities it is being part of the paleontology, not as a special paper or not as the special. Maybe it is a unit of that particular paleontology subject. So let us thank to everybody because there are no questions from the audience. I think your presentation has been such a very meticulously narrated to each and every point. So I think that's why the people are not having any questions. They got everything.
Or the other way around. Or the other way around.
No, you are not on.
One question.
Bhavani sir is yeah, please.
Students who are taking up ichnology or coming into paleontology as their PhD or their doctoral work?
I didn't get you fully.
Please repeat, sir.
How should we motivate the students to get into paleontology and ichnology?
Yes, we have to. And yes, for that we need to have, I think, workshops where the students can actually see these specimens, or also have field workshops for students.
Yeah, definitely. The Kutch is the best sections and the best exposures are there to explain.
Good. Jaisalmer is good.
Yeah. Even we have records from Andaman too.
That's very nice.
Yeah. There is one more question, ma'am, from Sudipta Dasgupta. How do you see the future of ichnology research in Indian context that we are discussing? How do you see the future of ichnology?
Dr. Dasgupta, you have worked with a very able person, and you have seen many basins, and in fact, as the as a coming up ichnologist, a senior person like me definitely has a lot of hopes from you. And you are situated in IIT, and I think we should all get together, form a forum for ourselves in India, and so to say, market the commodity called ichnology. Wherein, of course, I know we as my senior colleagues, my junior colleagues, and everyone would definitely contribute to it, because each one is working in a different region. But when we come together, we can definitely contribute a lot to this.
Yeah. Ma'am, since there are no questions, let us come to the part of the Thanksgiving. Let me allow to go for the thanks. So, audience, the participants, the research students and scientists, and if you see the list of the scientists, they are joining from the different universities, right from Varia Institute, Dr. S.K. Patya, Professor Hussain from Chennai, Professor N. Malarpudi from Bangalore, Dr. Sumed Humane from Nagpur, S.N. Mode from Pune, Rajani Panchang from Pune again, and S.K. Srivastav sir from Lucknow. And there are very big list those, and Dr. Vartak sir, and Professor Kunjal sir from Nagpur. So the persons who love the ichnology, besides this, there are other scientists too. They wanted to know about what are the different applications of ichnology in the different sciences, especially in the paleontology and geological sciences. And there are various aspects the other people can also work on. They can contribute and they can motivate the students. I hope this lecture also have motivated so many scientists, junior and senior scientists, to look up towards the ichnology in a different angle, because madam has concentrated on the petroleum aspect. There are different aspects also for the solving the different stratigraphical problems, as well as the sea level changes, and knowing whether we are working on the coastal area or in the middle, in the shelf area or in the deep marine area. That can be understood by knowing these different structures if you are not having the other fossils. So I am very much thankful from the on behalf of the Director, Institute of Science, I'm thankful to Dr. Kulkarni Madam for giving us your precious time and enlightening us on the ichnofossils and its applications and its role, and taking part in various discussions. I am very much thankful on behalf of our institute, our department, my colleagues, Professor Deshpande also. And I must thank to all participants, the scientists, the senior scientists, professors, and the teaching staff, PG students, research students, all those. Without their participation, it would have not been successful, because we have seen that there are more than 100 participants are there, and because we have restricted in Zoom, so they have shifted to YouTube. So I must thank to all those participants who have joined from the different corners of the India for their patience hearing and being till this time. I must thank to our director, our secretary, higher education, Government of Maharashtra, our director, higher education, Government of Maharashtra State, Pune, for permitting us and full support for arranging such webinars. We already arranged the other webinars too before this, and they have supported, and I'm thankful to our secretary as well as our director of higher education. I must thank to all participants, those who are just now who have taken part in the discussion, and those also to those who have sent the questions for the discussion. So I am very much thankful to not only to the participants, even to my colleagues and my colleagues of the institute from various departments. Those who have supported me in a lot of way. My colleague Dr. Sonar, my colleague Professor Deshpande, and other faculty members of the various departments. I must thank to them also. And without the technical support, this is not possible to arrange all those meetings or these webinars. So I must thank Sri Charan Singh Kaite, Head Department of Computer Science Department, and it's a Government Institute of Forensic Science. In this particular institute, in our campus, there is another institute known as the Government Forensic Science Institute, and that they have the Computer Science Department, and the head of the department is helping us in a big way, despite his busy schedule. I must thank to, on behalf of the Director Institute of Science, on behalf of the head from the Head Department of Geology, myself and my colleagues, we thank our technical support, Dr. Charan Singh Kaite sir. And with this, I request those all participants that they will get certificate, those who have participated and registered, and patiently listen here after 1 or 2 days. And a link will be shared with you for the downloading the certificate. So with this, we'll end this meeting, and I'm thankful to all of you, and especially Kulkarni Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you one and all.